The people who laugh the loudest are usually the ones who know the least. I have seen that happen more times than I can count, and this story is a perfect example. On a cool Friday evening in Charlotte, North Carolina, Victoria Reed stood in her kitchen holding an elegant black envelope that had arrived earlier that afternoon. She already knew who sent it before she opened it. Ryan Mercer never did anything by accident. Neither did Chloe Mercer. The gold lettering on the invitation practically confirmed it. Annual Mercer Foundation Gala. Formal attire required. Special guests welcome. Victoria slowly read the details while a pot of coffee cooled on the counter behind her. Most people would have thrown the invitation away. Some would have laughed. Others might have been angry. Victoria simply stood there for a few seconds, studying the paper. Then she smiled. Not because she was excited, because she understood exactly what it meant. Ryan and Chloe did not want her there because they respected her. They wanted her there because they wanted an audience. 3 years had passed since the divorce. 3 years of social media photos, luxury vacations, charity events, designer outfits. Every public appearance seemed carefully designed to send the same message. Look how happy we are. Look how successful we are. Look how much better life became after you left. Victoria had never responded. She never commented, never corrected anyone, never competed. She simply continued living her life. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A message from her longtime assistant appeared. Are you attending the gala? Victoria looked at the invitation again before typing a simple reply. Yes. A few seconds later came the response. Are you sure? Victoria smiled slightly. Very sure. After setting down her phone, she walked toward the large window overlooking the city. The evening lights stretched across the skyline. Somewhere downtown, preparations for the gala were already underway. Caterers, photographers, sponsors, donors, people who loved being seen. Ryan loved those events. He always had. During their marriage, he enjoyed introducing himself to important people. He enjoyed being recognized. He enjoyed telling stories about his success. The strange thing was that he rarely noticed who was standing beside him while he told those stories. Victoria remembered countless dinners where Ryan spoke for 20 minutes without asking a single question about anyone else. At the time, she ignored it. Looking back, perhaps she should not have. Across town, Ryan and Chloe were reviewing guest lists in a luxury condominium overlooking the city. Chloe smiled as she scanned the names. Then she found Victoria's. She accepted. Ryan looked up from his tablet. Really? Chloe laughed softly. I did not think she would actually come. Ryan leaned back in his chair. Good. Chloe raised an eyebrow. Good. He nodded. People will see how different our lives are now. Chloe smiled. Neither of them noticed how confident they sounded. And confidence can be dangerous when it is built on assumptions. Because while they were busy preparing for a night they believed would celebrate their success, Victoria was quietly preparing for the same event for a very different reason. One that neither of them could possibly imagine. The next morning arrived with the kind of quiet that usually follows a decision already made. Victoria woke before sunrise, made coffee, and sat by the window overlooking the city. The gala was still 2 days away, but somehow it already felt closer. Her phone remained unusually busy throughout the morning. Emails, meeting requests, schedule updates, messages from people preparing for an event that most guests viewed as another glamorous night of networking and fundraising. Victoria viewed it differently. For her, it was simply another item on a calendar. Around 10 o'clock, she drove across Charlotte in a silver sedan that looked ordinary enough to disappear in any parking lot. She had owned nicer vehicles. She simply never cared much about them. During her marriage, Ryan often joked about her lack of interest in expensive things. At least he thought he was joking. Looking back, many of those comments carried more judgment than humor. He never understood why she wore the same watch for years. Never understood why she preferred practical choices over flashy ones. He saw simplicity and assumed limitation. That was one of his biggest mistakes. Victoria parked outside a modern office building near Uptown Charlotte and entered through the main lobby. Several employees greeted her immediately. She returned each greeting with a smile before stepping into a private elevator that required special access. The doors closed quietly. By the time they opened again, she was on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the executive suite. Assistants moved through hallways carrying reports. Conference rooms were already occupied. A woman in her 50s approached holding a tablet. Good morning, Ms. Reed. Victoria accepted the tablet and reviewed several notes. Anything urgent? Only the gala preparations. Victoria smiled faintly. I suspected as much. The woman hesitated. There is still time to decline. Victoria handed the tablet back. No, I want to be there. Across town, Ryan and Chloe spent the afternoon preparing for the same event. Chloe stood in front of a mirror reviewing outfit options while Ryan scrolled through the final guest list. Every few minutes they discussed who might attend. Investors, donors, business owners, local politicians, the usual names. Then Chloe found Victoria's name again. You still think she is coming? Ryan laughed. Absolutely. How can you be so sure? Ryan leaned back comfortably. Because people like Victoria always want to prove they are doing fine. Chloe smiled. Even when they are not. Ryan nodded. Especially then. Neither of them noticed how much that statement revealed. Ryan still believed he understood Victoria. He still believed the story ended 3 years ago. Meanwhile, later that afternoon, Victoria entered a boardroom where several senior executives were waiting. They immediately stood when she walked in. Reports were distributed. Projections appeared on screens. Discussions began. One executive asked if she planned to attend the gala. Victoria simply nodded. Another executive exchanged a quick glance with a colleague. Neither said anything. Yet both smiled. Because unlike Ryan and Chloe, they knew something important. They knew exactly who Victoria Reed was. And they were already looking forward to watching everyone else find out. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of energy that only expensive events seem to create. By 6 o'clock, luxury vehicles were already lining the entrance of the Grand Regent Hotel in downtown Charlotte. Valets moved quickly. Photographers adjusted equipment. Guests stepped onto the red carpet beneath bright lights, while staff members guided them toward the ballroom. Inside, crystal chandeliers reflected warm light across polished marble floors. Everywhere people gathered in small groups discussing business, investments, and social connections. Ryan Mercer loved environments like this. They made him feel important. As he adjusted his tuxedo in front of a mirror near the ballroom entrance, Chloe smiled at her reflection. Her dark emerald gown had attracted compliments all evening. That was exactly what she wanted. This is going to be perfect, she said. Ryan nodded. It usually is. Together, they entered the ballroom. Almost immediately people approached them. Handshakes. Greetings. Small talk. Ryan moved through the room comfortably, introducing Chloe to donors and sponsors. Every conversation reinforced the image he had spent years building. Successful executive. Respected businessman. Happy marriage. Everything appeared exactly as it should. Then one of the guests glanced toward the entrance. Another person followed the same direction. Then another. Ryan noticed the shift before he understood the cause. The ballroom doors had opened again. Victoria Reed stepped inside. She was alone. No dramatic entrance. No announcement. No entourage. Just Victoria. She wore a simple black evening gown that was elegant without being flashy. A silver bracelet rested on one wrist. Her hair was neatly styled. Her expression remained calm. For a moment, Ryan almost smiled. The sight confirmed exactly what he expected. She came alone. No wealthy companion. No public display. Nothing to challenge the story he had created in his head. Chloe noticed her seconds later. Well, she said softly, she actually showed up. Ryan laughed. I told you she would. Across the ballroom, Victoria accepted a glass of sparkling water from a server and quietly moved through the crowd. She greeted a few people, exchanged brief conversations. Nothing unusual, yet something about the reactions around her felt different. Several guests seemed genuinely pleased to see her. One older businessman immediately walked over and shook her hand. A woman from a large financial firm hugged her warmly. Another executive smiled and asked when she had returned to Charlotte. Ryan watched from across the room. Do you know those people? Chloe asked. Not really, Ryan replied. Probably old contacts. The explanation sounded reasonable enough. Yet as the evening continued, more of those moments appeared. People approached Victoria, not the other way around. Some conversations lasted only seconds. Others continued for several minutes. A few guests seemed almost relieved to see her. One senior executive from a national corporation even left a conversation mid-sentence to greet her personally. Chloe frowned. That is strange. Ryan shrugged. People are being polite. But even he no longer sounded completely convinced. Near the center of the ballroom, Victoria remained perfectly comfortable. She never tried to attract attention, never raised her voice, never mentioned her accomplishments. Yet somehow attention kept finding her. Then something even stranger happened. Near the entrance, several members of the event committee suddenly began checking their watches. Staff members adjusted positions. Security personnel quietly moved toward designated locations. A whisper spread through the room. The chief executive officer was about to arrive. And when Victoria glanced toward the ballroom entrance, she smiled as if she already knew exactly who was coming. The atmosphere inside the ballroom shifted the moment people realized the chief executive officer was about to arrive. Conversations became shorter. Guests adjusted jackets and evening gowns. Event organizers moved quietly through the room, making last-minute checks. Even people who had spent years attending events like this seemed eager for the moment. Daniel Brooks was not the type of executive who appeared everywhere. When he attended something personally, people noticed. Ryan certainly noticed. He straightened his tuxedo and glanced toward Chloe. "This is a good opportunity," he said. Chloe smiled immediately. "I know." She had already practiced what she would say if she got a chance to speak with Daniel. Across the room, Victoria remained near one of the large windows overlooking downtown Charlotte. She seemed completely unaffected by the growing excitement around her. A server passed with a tray of drinks. She accepted another sparkling water and continued her conversation with an older woman from a charitable foundation. Nothing about her behavior suggested she was waiting for anyone important. Chloe noticed that too. "She still acts like she belongs here," Chloe said quietly. Ryan laughed. "Let her." A few minutes later, the ballroom doors opened. Security personnel appeared first. Then several senior executives entered. Finally, Daniel Brooks stepped into the room. The reaction was immediate. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Guests began moving toward him almost automatically. Daniel greeted people politely as he walked through the ballroom. Investors, board members, sponsors, community leaders. One by one he acknowledged them. Ryan smiled confidently. This was his world. Business relationships, networking, influence. He waited for the right moment before guiding Chloe closer to the crowd surrounding Daniel. Chloe seemed excited. "Do you think he will remember you?" Ryan nodded. "Of course." The confidence sounded natural. Yet something unexpected happened. As Daniel continued greeting guests, his attention suddenly shifted across the room. His expression changed slightly. Not surprise. Recognition. Genuine recognition. He stopped speaking in the middle of a conversation. Several people noticed immediately. Then he began walking. Not toward Ryan. Not toward Chloe. Not toward the investors gathered around him. He moved in a completely different direction. Across the ballroom. Directly toward Victoria. Ryan frowned. Chloe looked confused. Where is he going? Neither had an answer. Meanwhile, several senior executives exchanged knowing smiles. A few board members subtly stepped aside as Daniel approached. Victoria looked up from her conversation and smiled politely. Nothing dramatic. Nothing rehearsed. Just the smile of someone seeing a familiar colleague. Daniel reached her position and stopped. "Victoria," he said warmly. "Good to see you." "Good to see you too, Daniel," she replied. Nearby guests watched with growing curiosity. Ryan felt a strange tension settle in his chest. The interaction seemed too familiar, too comfortable, as if this was not their first meeting. Chloe folded her arms. Maybe they met through charity work. Ryan nodded quickly. Probably. Yet even he did not sound convinced. Daniel and Victoria exchanged a few words that nobody else could hear. Then several additional executives approached. Their reactions looked remarkably similar. Respectful, friendly, almost deferential. One executive even shook Victoria's hand with both of his. Chloe's expression tightened. Something about the scene felt wrong. Or rather, it felt wrong according to everything she believed about Victoria. Because the woman she expected to embarrass tonight was somehow becoming one of the most important people in the room. And as more guests began paying attention to the growing circle around Victoria, Ryan realized the evening was no longer unfolding the way he expected. Ryan tried to convince himself he was imagining things. People recognized people at events like this all the time. Executives knew executives. Donors knew board members. Business leaders crossed paths constantly. There had to be a simple explanation. Yet the longer he watched Victoria, the harder that explanation became to believe. Nearly every few minutes, another influential guest approached her. Some stopped only briefly. Others remained for longer conversations. What stood out was not that they knew her. It was how they spoke to her. There was a level of respect that could not be faked. A level of familiarity that suggested years of professional history. Chloe noticed it too. She stood beside Ryan while pretending to focus on another conversation. "Something feels strange," she whispered. Ryan forced a smile. "You are overthinking it." But deep down he was beginning to wonder the same thing. Across the ballroom, Victoria remained completely relaxed. She never sought attention, never raised her voice, never interrupted conversations. Yet somehow she had become the center of interest without trying. One of the event organizers approached her carrying a folder. Victoria reviewed a few pages, signed something, and handed it back. The organizer thanked her before leaving. Ryan narrowed his eyes. "Did you see that?" Chloe nodded. Why would an organizer need her signature? Neither had an answer. A few moments later, guests were invited toward the main reception area, where speeches would soon begin. Small groups slowly moved toward the stage. Round tables filled with sponsors, executives, and community leaders. Ryan and Chloe found seats near the front. Victoria remained standing near the side of the room speaking with Daniel Brooks and several senior executives. Again, the sight bothered Ryan more than he wanted to admit. During their marriage, Victoria never talked much about work. She rarely discussed professional accomplishments. She never bragged about meetings or business connections. At the time, Ryan assumed there was simply nothing significant to discuss. Looking back, that assumption now felt less certain. As guests settled into their seats, Chloe leaned closer. "Maybe we should invite her over." Ryan looked surprised. "Why?" Chloe smiled thinly. "Because if everyone is paying attention to her, I want to know why." A few minutes later, Chloe stood and walked across the room before Ryan could stop her. Victoria noticed her approaching immediately. "Chloe," Victoria said politely. "Good evening." Chloe smiled. The smile looked friendly, but Victoria recognized the tone instantly. "You look nice," Chloe said. "I was not sure what to expect." "Thank you," Victoria replied calmly. Chloe glanced around. It must be exciting to attend an event like this. Victoria remained silent for a moment. "It is a lovely evening." Chloe laughed softly. "Ryan and I come to events like this all the time. It can be overwhelming if you are not used to it." Several nearby guests overheard the comment. A few exchanged quick glances. Victoria simply took a sip of sparkling water. She did not defend herself, did not argue, did not react. That only seemed to encourage Chloe. "So what are you doing these days?" Chloe asked. "Still consulting?" Before Victoria could answer, one of the senior executives standing nearby suddenly looked uncomfortable. Another executive lowered his eyes. The reaction lasted only a second, but Victoria noticed it. So did Daniel Brooks. And for the first time that evening, the room began to feel as though something important was about to happen. The silence that followed Chloe's question lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Nearby conversations slowed. Several guests pretended not to listen while listening very carefully. Victoria remained calm. She had experienced moments like this before. Not because people always underestimated her, because people often revealed more about themselves than they realized when they thought someone had less power than they did. Chloe smiled and waited for an answer. "I stay busy," Victoria said politely. It was a simple response. Nothing more. Yet Chloe seemed disappointed. She clearly wanted details. Something she could measure. Something she could compare. Something that would place Victoria beneath her in the invisible ranking system she carried around in her head. Ryan finally approached the group. "Everything okay?" he asked. Chloe laughed lightly. "Of course. We were just catching up." Victoria nodded politely. Ryan noticed the executives standing nearby. Several of them looked uncomfortable. Daniel Brooks remained silent, watching, observing. The entire exchange had become strangely awkward, though Ryan could not understand why. Chloe continued smiling. "I was telling Victoria how much we enjoy these events. They can be difficult if you are not connected to this world." Another executive shifted his weight and looked away. Daniel's expression remained neutral. Victoria simply took another sip of sparkling water. She did not react. She did not defend herself. That calmness only made Chloe more confident. "I mean, not everyone gets invited into rooms like this," Chloe added. "You have to build relationships over many years." The irony of the statement nearly caused one board member to laugh. He quickly hid it behind a cough. Ryan noticed. So did Chloe. Neither understood the reason. Around them, more guests had started paying attention. Not because Chloe was being loud, because everyone else seemed increasingly aware that she was walking into a situation she did not understand. Daniel finally glanced at his watch. The program should begin soon. One of the event organizers approached carrying a folder and several printed schedules. "Mr. Brooks," the organizer said, "we are ready whenever you are." Daniel nodded. Then the organizer turned toward Victoria. "Would you like to review the final changes before we begin?" Chloe blinked. Ryan frowned. Victoria accepted the folder casually. Of course. She spent a few seconds reviewing the pages. Then she made a small notation and returned them. "Looks good." The organizer smiled. "Thank you." Before leaving, he added, "The board approved your recommendation this afternoon." "Excellent," Victoria replied. The organizer walked away. Chloe stared after him. Ryan looked equally confused. Neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Chloe laughed nervously. "Recommendation for what?" Victoria met her eyes. "Just a project." The answer sounded harmless. Yet Daniel's expression suggested otherwise. Across the ballroom, guests were now taking their seats. Large screens illuminated near the stage. The official program was about to begin. Daniel glanced toward Victoria again. "I should get ready." Victoria nodded. "Good luck." Daniel smiled. "I do not think I am the one who needs luck tonight." The comment seemed innocent enough. Yet Ryan felt something tighten in his stomach. He could not explain why. Then Daniel started walking toward the stage. The crowd settled into silence. The opening remarks were about to begin. And within the next few minutes, every assumption Ryan and Chloe carried into that ballroom was about to be tested in front of everyone. The ballroom lights dimmed slightly as the evening program officially began. Guests settled into their seats. Conversations faded into whispers. On the large stage, a massive screen displayed images from charitable projects funded over the past year. Daniel Brooks stepped to the podium and welcomed everyone. His voice carried easily across the room. He thanked sponsors, community leaders, and donors who had supported the foundation's work. Ryan listened comfortably at first. This part was familiar. Every gala followed roughly the same pattern. Speeches, recognition, networking, photos, nothing unusual. Yet even from his seat, he could not ignore the strange feeling that had followed him all evening. Every time he looked toward Victoria, someone important seemed to be speaking with her. Every time he thought he understood the situation, something happened that made even less sense. Daniel continued speaking while images changed behind him. Several major initiatives were highlighted. New education programs, community investments, economic development projects. The audience applauded politely after each presentation. Then Daniel paused. His expression shifted slightly. "Before we continue," he said, "there is someone in this room whose leadership has shaped many of the opportunities we are celebrating tonight." Ryan glanced toward Chloe. She smiled immediately. Both assumed Daniel was preparing to recognize a major donor or board member. Around the ballroom, people began turning toward different tables, trying to guess who would be mentioned. Daniel looked across the audience. "Many of you know her. Some of you have worked with her for years. Others may not realize how much of an impact she has had behind the scenes." Victoria remained seated near the side of the ballroom, calm, unbothered, almost as if she already knew what was coming. Ryan noticed that too. Daniel smiled. Then he stepped away from the podium. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Instead of waiting for applause or introducing another guest, Daniel walked down the stairs from the stage and moved directly across the ballroom floor. Guests watched silently. Conversations stopped completely. Hundreds of eyes followed him. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Daniel continued walking. Past major donors. Past investors. Past elected officials. Straight toward Victoria Reed. When he reached her table, he extended his hand with genuine respect. Then he smiled and spoke words that instantly changed the entire room. "Good evening, boss." Silence. Absolute silence. For one heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ryan stared at Daniel, then at Victoria, then back at Daniel again. Chloe's smile disappeared completely. Several guests looked shocked. Others looked amused. A few executives appeared relieved, as though they had been waiting all evening for this moment to arrive. Victoria stood and shook Daniel's hand. "Good evening, Daniel." The exchange sounded perfectly normal to them. Yet everyone else in the room understood what that single word meant. Boss. Not advisor. Not consultant. Not supporter. Boss. The title traveled through the ballroom faster than any announcement could have. Guests immediately began whispering. Ryan heard fragments from nearby tables. I told you. That is her. She owns most of it. How did they not know? Chloe sat frozen. Ryan felt as though the floor beneath him had shifted. Every assumption he carried into the gala suddenly seemed fragile. Every conclusion he had drawn about Victoria suddenly seemed incomplete. And as Daniel invited Victoria to join him near the stage, Ryan Mercer realized he was about to learn who his ex-wife really was. For several seconds after Daniel spoke, the ballroom seemed suspended in complete silence. The kind of silence that happens when hundreds of people realize they have all just witnessed something important. Victoria stood calmly beside him while guests struggled to process what they had heard. Ryan felt as though every conversation from the past 3 years had suddenly become questionable. Chloe looked equally stunned. The confidence she carried all evening was gone, replaced by confusion. Daniel guided Victoria toward the stage. Neither appeared uncomfortable. Neither appeared surprised. That alone told its own story. This was not an unexpected moment for them. It was simply the truth becoming visible. Once they reached the stage, Daniel returned to the podium. The audience remained unusually quiet. Even the waitstaff seemed slower as they moved around the room. Everyone wanted answers. Daniel smiled warmly. Many of you know Victoria Reed through various projects and initiatives. Some of you have worked with her directly. Others may know her only by reputation. A large image appeared on the screen behind him. It displayed one of the largest development projects in the Southeast. Several guests immediately recognized it. The project had been discussed in business publications for months. What many people do not realize, Daniel continued, is that Victoria has played a central role in shaping some of the most successful investments our organization has undertaken over the past decade. Another image appeared, then another. Economic development projects, educational partnerships, community investments, corporate initiatives. The scale of the work became impossible to ignore. Ryan stared at the screen. Some of the projects were larger than anything his own company had ever managed. Around him, guests nodded knowingly. They were not learning something new. They were simply watching others catch up. Daniel continued. Victoria serves as executive chairwoman of our parent organization and remains one of the largest stakeholders in the company. A ripple moved through the audience. Even though many people already suspected the truth, hearing it spoken publicly carried weight. Chloe slowly turned toward Ryan. Neither spoke. Neither seemed capable of speaking. Victoria had never mentioned any of this. Not once. Ryan suddenly remembered countless moments during their marriage. Invitations she declined. Meetings she attended without explanation. Calls she took privately. Trips she rarely discussed. Back then, he assumed those details were unimportant. Now they formed a completely different picture. One he had never bothered to see. Daniel smiled toward Victoria. More importantly, she has spent years avoiding recognition she fully deserves. The audience applauded. This time the applause lasted much longer. Victoria acknowledged it politely before stepping forward. When she spoke, her voice remained calm. Thank you, Daniel. She paused briefly. Everything we celebrate tonight exists because of the efforts of many people, not one person. The response sounded exactly like her. No bragging. No dramatic speech. No attempt to embarrass anyone. Just simple honesty. That somehow made the moment even more powerful. Ryan lowered his eyes. For the first time all evening, he understood something painful. The woman standing on that stage was not a different version of Victoria. She had always been this person. The only difference was that now everyone else could see it too. And as the applause filled the ballroom once again, Ryan Mercer realized the biggest mistake of his life was never losing Victoria. It was never taking the time to truly know her while he still had the chance. The rest of the gala passed in a way Ryan Mercer would never forget. Not because anyone humiliated him. Not because anyone pointed fingers. In some ways, that made it worse. Nobody needed to say a word. The truth had already spoken for itself. After the applause faded, guests began approaching Victoria from every direction. Investors wanted to greet her. Foundation leaders wanted to thank her. Business executives wanted a few minutes of her time. The same people who had barely noticed her when she arrived now waited patiently for an opportunity to speak with her. Through it all, Victoria remained exactly the same. Calm, polite, gracious. She smiled, listened, and thanked people for their support. She did not act superior. She did not mention the comments Chloe had made earlier. She did not remind anyone how wrong they had been. Ryan watched from across the ballroom and realized that was one of the reasons people respected her so much. She never seemed interested in proving herself. Chloe stood beside him in complete silence. For perhaps the first time all evening, she had nothing to say. Every confident remark she had made earlier now felt painfully small. Eventually, she looked at Ryan. "You knew?" Ryan gave a slow shake of his head. No. The answer sounded strange even to him. Because it was true. He had spent years married to Victoria and still had not known. Near the end of the evening, Victoria finally stepped away from the crowd and moved toward a quieter section of the ballroom. Ryan saw the opportunity and walked over. For a moment, neither spoke. The noise of the gala seemed distant. "Victoria," he said softly. She looked at him and smiled politely. Not warmly. Not coldly. Just politely. "Ryan." He nodded. "I owe you an apology." Victoria listened without interrupting. Ryan looked down briefly before continuing. "I spent years thinking I understood you." He gave a small laugh. "Turns out I barely knew anything at all." Victoria remained silent for a moment. Then she said something that would stay with him long after the evening ended. "You knew exactly what you wanted to know." Ryan had no response. Because deep down, he knew she was right. Throughout their marriage, he had been so focused on his own ambitions, his own goals, and his own image that he rarely stopped to ask who she really was. Not once had she hidden from him. He had simply never looked closely enough. A few minutes later, Daniel approached to let Victoria know her driver had arrived. She thanked him and gathered her things. As she prepared to leave, several guests stopped her one final time to say goodbye. Ryan watched as people opened paths for her without being asked. The respect was effortless. Genuine. Earned. Victoria turned toward the exit. Then she paused briefly and looked back. Not at the ballroom. Not at the stage. At the life she had once shared with Ryan. For a second, there was something thoughtful in her eyes. Then it was gone. She smiled politely and walked away. Months later, new projects carried her name. New investments transformed communities across the region. Her influence continued to grow. Ryan occasionally saw her in business publications and interviews. He never reached out again. Some lessons arrived too late to change the past, but they still change the person who learns them. And perhaps that was the real ending. Not that Victoria became powerful. She already was. Not that Ryan lost everything. He did not. The real ending was much simpler. The woman everyone underestimated never needed revenge. She only needed the chance to be seen. And once the truth finally stepped into the light, it never had to explain itself again.